Hello, everyone. I hope you're all happy and healthy along with your respective families wherever you're located on this God's green earth. Welcome to today's episode of the Real Talks with Amini, and I'm honored to have Miss Annie Pforzheimer, a distinguished U.S. Diplomat who has had a career of over 30 years serving in some of the critical regions around the world, from Latin America and Africa, as well as in Afghanistan. She has been acting Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Afghanistan. She has served as Deputy Chief of Mission in Kabul. And right now, she's a respected commentator, a professor, and an advocate for human rights as well as women's empowerment. So we'll get her perspective about the U.S. involvement in Afghanistan, about the current situation, as well as about the future. So please stay with us. Miss Annie Pforzheimer, welcome on the show. Thank you very much for giving us the time. Maybe for the start, if we can get your reflections on the U.S. involvement in Afghanistan in the past 2 decades. From your perspective, when you're looking back, what are some of the biggest successes of the U.S. Mission in Afghanistan and some of the biggest missed opportunities from your view?
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to talk with you because, first of all, I admire what you do. And second of all, it was always a pleasure to talk to you when we worked together back in Kabul. Um, I think the successes, the U.S. involvement, one of the facts of history is that there was very little planning that went into the U.S. involvement in Afghanistan when it first started. The shock of the attacks in 9/11 turned into this impetus for action, this idea that something had to be done. And even though many smart people then and now would tell you that the first thing that should have happened, should have been some kind of negotiation, maybe the Taliban would have felt that they could talk at that moment. um, I think you do have to understand the emotional reaction of Americans, the American government, and to some degree the rest of the world at that one moment in time. And so the smartest thing to do is not always the easiest thing to do. And the US engagement started in a way on the wrong foot because it was done in a spirit of total revenge. But then after a while, it became an involvement that I think the word total could be used in a lot of areas. People wanted total success. They wanted total liberation for people who had been oppressed. They wanted total development and total elections and a lot of things that truly take time to take hold in a society. The US idea was it could happen quickly if we spent enough money and put enough people into the mix. So what we missed was a lot. We missed where there would have been any kind of chance to have a more nuanced idea of what was possible, the chance to go a little bit slower and to get more people on the side of the Constitution and the Republican government. We missed the fact that there should have been a completely different relationship with Pakistan.
Mhm.
We missed a lot.
Yeah.
And my two tours of service in Afghanistan were from 2009 to 10 and then 2017 to 18. So I saw, in a way, the kind of arc of that involvement, and I saw a lot of what we did wrong and what we did right.
Yeah. So, just to clarify, what was the biggest successes in your view? Because you talked about the missed opportunities.
Um, I think the successes, of course, people say, and they're right, to point to the people, the young leaders, the thousands and millions of young people who went to school, the people who were trained in to be doctors and teachers. So in the human capital, the success is there. The success, which is being reversed, of longer lives for Afghans, better lives medically, more job opportunities, more industry opportunities. All of those successes were real. Uh, the fact is that the Taliban has reversed those successes, but done so with great brutality. I mean, it took a lot to make people stop sending their girls to school.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, there's a lot that we achieved together, Afghans and Americans, and there's a lot there. The human capital, as you indicated, even though they have been forced out, most critical aspect of them, the women of Afghanistan and others, but there is significant potential, and that investment and that joint endeavor has a lot that could deliver once again for both of the countries moving ahead. And we'll talk a second about the future of Afghanistan as well. But if we can focus on the current situation right now, you hinted about the reversal of the achievements by the Taliban with brutality. Um, what is your assessment of the way they're governing Afghanistan for the second time? And given the opening that the international community give to them, the red carpet in a way approach that most of the countries have been providing the Taliban. How did they took all of these opportunities and resources that were given to them, and how did they handle themselves as those who are governing a territory, a country?
I think that the supreme leader doesn't see himself governing, right? He sees himself as simply, taking care of a group of people. If let's say he's sincere, I don't know, but he sincerely believes that everything he's doing for the good of the people. I think the people around him are growing corrupt, and they have absolute power, and the way that they use it, some of it is corruption about money, but I think some of it is corruption about torture and women. They are using the power of their position to take advantage of people. Um, so I think that the Taliban is a little bit fractured. They've got that sort of uppermost group of people who I think honestly may believe in all the things that they're saying. And then underneath are people who are simply trying to, maintain power, keep their fighters in line, um, take resources while nobody is watching, and survive.
Hmm.
I wouldn't call it pragmatic or moderate. I don't think that exists. But I do think there are some people in the Taliban structure who are involved in the daily running of things.
Hmm.
And I think they are, as I said, growing more corrupt. They are abusing their power. And in a few cases where somebody has said something mildly critical, they are stomped on, arrested, disappeared. And so I don't think that they have too much motivation to do anything more than just live from day to day and survive in the post that they've been given.
Hmm. And I'm sure you're plugged in with a lot of Afghan women from the time that you served in Afghanistan and also right now. There's a wide network of Afghan diaspora around the world that you're in touch. What do you hear from Afghan women on the ground? What do they tell you about their life under Taliban for the second time? And also, what do you think is their expectation from international community? What do they want in terms of solidarity or support?
Well, I will say this, that many of them want solidarity and support even closer to home than the international community. They would like it from Afghan men. There are some real heroes among Afghan men, but there are plenty of others who are not and who are living in this situation, and I don't think are supporting the women in their lives. Um, and what Afghan women are going through, I mean, there are people who are better placed than I am to talk about this, but it's sort of an excruciating disappearance, not only from all public life, but apparently disappearance even at home. That Afghan women have fewer and fewer rights inside their own houses to be part of the decision making in the family. And now that there has been this internet ban as of last week, even the smallest lifelines for study and work are being erased. So I guess that the image that somebody has of what Afghan women should be doing is, you know, household chores, producing children, and sitting with their hands folded. They're not even encouraging girls to study in religious schools. So they have no actual function. And I have absolutely no idea what that feels like. It is so unbelievably difficult, but the things I read, the people that I've heard from, no one's giving up completely if they have a choice in the matter, but they're not far away from having no choice in the matter.
Yeah. And also, of course, you alluded to the Afghan responsibility. It's our country and it's our responsibility to address the crisis, but also Afghanistan is part of the world that we're living. And so there is international rules and regulations and international institutions, and also all of the countries who are governing themselves based on a set of values. And when they see those values being violated in Afghanistan, what do you think is the perception among the policymakers around the world, particularly in countries of the free world, when they're looking at Afghanistan for the second time and almost for 4 years, women being treated in such inhumane manner? Do they feel some sort of responsibility to address this, or you think it's not the case?
I think it is not the case that they feel a direct responsibility. I mean, they should. But everything you alluded to in terms of a rules-based order and the norms of human rights is not necessarily the ascendant value right now anywhere in the world. And you have countries like China where rights are being trampled on all the time and nothing happens. So I'm not being cynical. I am a professor, though, of international relations. And so I have to kind of clarify that the nation state is a very powerful uh, element. And so, if what you're talking about is the desire to see something different, certainly. I mean, that desire is expressed on a regular basis. The Security Council met on Afghanistan last week, and they talked about their desire to see something different. No question about it. But that's talk. There are economic sanctions, which is a tool. And so the economic sanctions are still there, despite many countries' best efforts to dislodge them. But after talk and economic sanctions, the toolkit is strictly military. And that is something that you do not see people talking about in the international community. And I have to say, there are other countries, as I mentioned, China, but there's a country, North Korea, that every single day people wake up and whether you're a woman or a man, your life is pretty dire. But there they've been for 70 years. It is not a necessarily the international community's strong suit to try to affect change inside another country.
Mhm. Yep. And what about the threat level, the perception in terms of Taliban being an umbrella for all of the terrorist networks in Afghanistan? We had them once in charge, and we saw what happened in
Yeah.
the United States. Do people Are people concerned about them being in charge for the second time, and of course maintaining all of the previous ties and much more advanced? With all of the terrorist groups and all of them having bases and camps throughout the country, and planning and designing. And now Daesh is also there, and the reports that they're working in conjunction together as good cop, bad cop against the world. What do you think the world thinks about the threat level coming from Afghanistan under Taliban regime?
Well, I would say in a word that the world is not taking that seriously enough. So, what do they think about it? I mean, I think most people accept the analysis that you've just said. There are some people who are still going to argue that the Taliban is kind of, fighting against our enemy, Daesh, so that makes them better. There are some people who fight over or argue over whether Al Qaeda is truly there. those people exist. I believe they are wrong. But actually, just going back to that Security Council discussion last week, it was very interesting to me that every single country, including the, supposed allies in Russia and China and Pakistan, they are all raising this issue. They are all quite concerned. And Central Asia is extremely concerned. So, in fact, there is that level of anxiety about the Taliban. I would say that there's a very important report that's supposed to come out every year, has usually come out in the summertime, and it still hasn't come out. I'm hearing it might come out next month in October. That is the annual report about the sanctions against the Taliban, and that has details about all of the things you mentioned. And I think that report has to come out to make it even more clear
Mhm.
that this is a huge and growing problem.
Right. Right. And you previously alluded to the fact that it's Afghans' responsibility and Afghan men, of course, are not doing enough. But there are reports that there are some resistance groups here and there in Afghanistan. What do you hear, and what's your assessment of the Afghans resisting the Taliban since the collapse of the republic since 2021? Have they been able to find any foothold anywhere? Are there a possibility for growing support to them right now, or given the concerns that you mentioned from the regional countries? Because if the regional countries are concerned about the Taliban, why are they not helping those who are anti-Taliban to get rid of the Taliban and to establish a governance where they could truly be counterterrorism people in charge?
Well, my understanding from just the regular sources that anybody can read is that the resistance is in a couple of different, not factions, but it has different elements, that it is not taking hold in any kind of widespread way. It certainly doesn't compare to the kind of elements that the Taliban had, let's say, 4 years in after the NATO forces arrived in 2001. Um, I think that the issue for me is Afghans talking to one another have to figure out what is the big common basis that we all have for agreeing with each other. And I would just say, I might disagree with you slightly that the goal would be to, push the Taliban out. And then you have, the world where you have a government and it's a counterterrorism issue. What I think Afghanistan's history shows is that each time a group is pushed out, it becomes the next insurgency. And it's really important to make that insurgency as small and manageable as possible. Afghanistan has run out of foreign sponsors. No more British, no more USSR, no more USA. No other country, I believe, is going to come and take care of the military side, to support it. So what happens is that Afghans with other Afghans have to decide, what does this country look like when the greatest number of us agree on how it should be governed? And it's possible that that agreement doesn't look exactly like the 2004 Constitution, but it sure doesn't look like what is happening now. I always say, what if you took a blank sheet of paper and on that sheet of paper, write down all the things that 80% of Afghans agree on? And if you could fill that piece of paper, then what you have is the basis for the greatest agreement possible of a form of government, of a type of living where, yeah, sure, there'll be insurgents, but they'll be small. They'll be a vast minority.
Mhm.
So getting to that agreement is going to be about listening and accommodating viewpoints that at this point in time don't listen to each other and don't accommodate each other.
Mhm.
But I don't
Okay.
know if you agree or not, but I think that that's what I think about when I think about a stable future for Afghanistan.
Mhm. Well, what you're presenting comes from a good heart that you have in terms of addressing the conflict, the human conflict that we have, and also based on the fact that there's an assumption there that the insurgency is domestic, it's indigenous. But the truth of the matter is, Ms. Pforzheimer, in Afghanistan, that always groups fighting over power, there is one way or another they receive support from outside. And Afghans, even though they desire to be the people in charge of making decisions on their own, they do not have the independence. We see it in earlier episodes. It was basically a struggle field between the Russia and British, and then America got in. It was Soviet Union and America. And then America left, but they thought that by leaving, that means Afghanistan will be on their own, but it wasn't. USSR transformed into the new Russia, but the people in charge were previously USSR, and all of the people in charge of Afghanistan policy stayed on their roles, and they continued to pursue their objective of subjugating Afghanistan. And they couldn't achieve it through overt military occupation and through communists. They transformed their means and they created Taliban. And the Taliban are receiving support from Russia, and that's why they have been able to exist for so long, and that's why they've been able to challenge NATO and the US. I mean, how could one imagine that a small insurgency, domestic insurgency, would be able to challenge US and NATO coalition unless they did not receive support from a major power in the region, and that was Russia. Of course, they did it with the help of Iranians and Pakistanis, and that's how it got a little bit confusing at the end. And they started the peace overtures, and they discredited the Afghan government by tainting the Afghan elections. And right now, they're the only country that recognized the Taliban, and that says a lot about it. So. I mean, it would be great for Afghans to have that sort of an independence, but realizing that they do not, that the Taliban do receive support from Russia, they are in beds with the Chinese, with the Iranians, looking at from that angle, looking at China being a threat, as indicated by different US national security strategies, the Communist Political Party, of course, not the Chinese people, and also what the Putin is doing in the world, and also the threats from the Iranians. And now they're being in bed with the Taliban. Do you think from that lens, the international community would feel obligated or feel the necessity to support the people who are anti-Taliban in order to get rid of the Taliban?
Well, I mean, it's a good argument, and yet the answer is pretty clearly no, in that we haven't seen it, right? This is not, it's not that this is just being thought of. And so all of the issues that you raise, notwithstanding, the international community, if you mean by that, the US and NATO, is not interested in returning to Afghanistan in any form. And I don't see that changing, absent obviously anything, radical that would happen over here. Um, there are lots of reasons for that. We don't have to go into them, but there are lots of reasons for that.
Yeah.
So, even accepting your basic idea that the Taliban success was not an indigenous success, I think I still see that there's not a way forward which just corrects the balance, because you can't rely on, as you saw in 2021, a country that's not a neighbor. I mean, I'm not saying you rely on your neighbors, but you at least can predict what they're going to do. Whereas a country like the US that's so far away that physically doesn't feel itself to be particularly threatened, uh, is going to leave. It might come back, but it will leave again. I mean, it will never stay. So I think that introducing that level of unpredictability and irrational behavior by, maybe we do something good in in supporting these groups, but also maybe we would do something terrible and then we'd leave. So I guess I consider trying to plan for the future without that external factor as a big part of it.
Yeah.
I do not have a better idea than the one I mentioned to you.
Yes.
Um, so
Yeah.
that's sort of where I return.
Yeah, I mean it's a good segue to get into the latest breaking news about Bagram Air Base, or the U.S. President's desire to retake Bagram Air Base. Is something that has been widely talked about among Afghans, and I'm sure international observers as well. What is your take? What does this mean, and what should Afghans realistically expect from this announcement?
I think Afghans should expect nothing from this
Mhm.
announcement. I don't think it means anything.
Mhm.
I think that the president says things to say it, to just put something out there. I mean, you could conceivably, I could be wrong, and tomorrow we're going to wake up to some kind of deal that's been struck. But I would put a lot of money on not being wrong on this one. Because where do I start? I mean, open Bagram for what? I mean, for aircraft, maybe, but the aircraft have to travel over something in order to land somewhere, in which case anybody with a RPG could have a vote, or the aircraft have to you know, pilots have to sleep somewhere, and I don't think you could imagine a safe place for an American to be in Afghanistan. Um, and like anybody who worked at Bagram would become a target. Any Afghan who worked there would become a target, which is horrible.
Mhm.
There's about a million reasons why this would never happen.
Mhm.
And the messenger, the person who said this, is the same person who said he wanted to invade Canada.
Mhm. I see. So you think there is similarity between the remarks that he has made related to Canada or Greenland as in Bagram as well. There's no other rationale behind it or any planning behind it.
I believe that when Adam Buller, who is in charge of trying to get Americans released
Hmm.
from captivity. He was in Kabul, that's for sure. We saw the pictures.
Hmm.
And I think that he raised Bagram when he was there. That's my belief. I think it was reported, and Adam has been in different formats that you probably saw where he as much as admitted that. And he said essentially, this is something the president wants. I believe all of that is true. What does it mean on the other end? I think that in this one case, the Taliban could have met their match when it comes to irrational negotiating.
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
know, this person who just says whatever comes into his mind. But is there a plan? I don't think so.
yeah. Well, let's see. Let's see what happens. The coming days and weeks will
And
make it
also,
test
I'm just
clear.
trying to figure out why would this be? This is not a good thing. Like, if this actually were to happen, this would be a very bad thing
Hmm.
for Afghans who care about their country.
Hmm.
Number one, it would be the next thing to recognition of the Taliban as a government.
Hmm.
Number two, it would be simply militarizing the relationship to the point where human rights would get even further down in the list of priorities. Number three, it would cause a backlash with China, Russia, Iran. So what would be there's nothing good about this. This is just bad. It's not the US coming back to Bagram and then they're going to bring the Fulbright program. It is the US getting into bed with a very bad group of people. So I personally hope this never happens.
Mm. From Afghans' conversation, for your information, I mean, there are some who predict this scenario that if the U.S. Is to come back in Bagram, they would be doing some sort of a deal with Taliban. But for a larger segment of the Afghan youth, particularly those who understand the Taliban and those who understand the United States, they know that these two things cannot coexist. They will be talking, they will be speaking, negotiating, and even signing agreements, but at the end of the day, they will never sit together across the table and work on joint missions anywhere. And so the perspective is that if the U.S. is serious about coming back to Bagram for its national security interests, they will not have any option but to go after the Taliban because they will not agree with U.S. coming back, and they need to remove this threat. And the U.S. has the capability to get rid of the Taliban. And of course, not just the U.S., but also Afghans have the capability if they see that sort of a seriousness from the U.S. And so I think that is the assessment. And from the China and the backlash, I mean, we see what the Chinese are doing right now. Chinese and Pakistan, Chinese, Iranians, and Russians are already in bed with Taliban. I mean, they're already put Afghans in chain. And so Afghans would rather be unchained and fighting, have a chance to fight rather than being in chains. And so I think in the next episode, what Afghans are predicting is that if the US do come back, there will be some sort of an understanding that this time Afghans will not tolerate having enemies of this state being hosted anywhere and will not tolerate any of the regional countries having malign activities towards Afghanistan's government and particularly our democracy, because we do understand that these regimes will never accept a democratic framework in Afghanistan. And so if we do establish that with the support of the US, Afghans are willing to join the US forces in order to tackle the threats in the region together, and we will not be afraid from doing that. I think that
Sadiq,
is the
yeah, I do have to sort of point you into one area of reality, which is if everything that you just described were happening, how would the United States possibly resupply any forces it had on the ground?
Mhm.
Afghanistan's geographic position is unfortunate. There is no way for anybody, any country that wanted to come in and do any of the things you were just describing without going through Pakistan
Mhm.
or by air for a very considerable amount of money or through Uzbekistan. I mean, this is, you know all about this. This is a really important logistical side,
Yeah.
right, to any kind of military operation. And all of the options are bad. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we'll see. We'll see how it happens, uh, if it happens or not. But as I stated, there are a segment of Afghans who are very hopeful that this would be a good change for Afghanistan, and of course, understanding the logistical issues, and that's something for the U.S. policymakers to work it out with any of the countries in the region if they have reached any understanding with Pakistanis or we'll see. So maybe we can do get your assessment. I mean, you have worked in policy, you have worked in now as a professor, as an advocate, seeing both sides of the aisle from your perspective for those who are coming about, the younger generation of policymakers and diplomats, students anywhere who are watching this. Uh, what is the some of the gaps from your perspective between what is the policy when it's being formulated, when it's being announced, and the realities on the ground when it actually being implemented?
Which policy? The
Any
gap.
policy, for foreign policy we're talking about.
Well, the foreign policy, we just talked about with security policy, and I just gave you an example of the gap that you can say that your security policy is to fight the Taliban back in, the period that we were there. And yet, in order to bring the trucks and fuel and food and everything you needed to supply the military that was fighting the Taliban, you were paying the country that was hosting the Taliban. And this was insane, honestly, but it was something that people thought about and they decided was sort of the best way to do what they wanted to do. But we could see how one policy was being undermined by the logistical and technical needs of that very policy.
Yeah.
Another policy was to, strengthen a democracy, but Afghanistan had a lot of different impediments to voting,
Mhm.
impediments that were geographic, impediments of people being accustomed to the tradition of it, or just that there hadn't been a census of the country since the 1970s. And so an election was going to be undermined by those details, even though an election was a good idea in general, in order to give legitimacy to the government that would, carry out all the rest of the policies.
Hmm. Yeah. And what do you think from all the discussions that we had related to the past and present? What is your vision for the future of Afghanistan in the next 10 to 15 years? And what do you think is the responsibility of the Afghans in diaspora, particularly the Afghan youth, as well as other stakeholders and international allies or international friends of Afghanistan in achieving that vision for Afghanistan?
Well, I'll start with the role of the international people. I think that the role is to make sure that the Taliban is not recognized, and also to continue to speak up for human rights within the country. And I'm going to say that my vision of what human rights we should be speaking up for is not that like someone like me should be speaking up for women's rights. What I should be speaking up for is the right of Afghans to not be killed for expressing their opinion. The right to life and not being taken to jail and not being tortured and not being killed. Because if I'm fighting for that right, then Afghans can fight for all the other ones. So I do think that there should be some real focus, as Richard Bennett is so good at doing, real focus on those fundamental rights and freedoms which enable Afghans to be the ones who put into words what they want. The idea that I'm supposed to be the one who says, women's education, why me? Why not Afghans? But they can't because they face terrible, terrible repression. The role of Afghans themselves, especially the youth, I mean, I've told you what I think. I think that Afghans should be talking to one another to find out where's their common ground. What's the biggest piece of common ground they can establish, which has power, and that a constant pushing against the restrictions that they have without getting themselves killed, but constantly, whoever is in a position to say to the Taliban, this is wrong. You're taxing me. You're not doing things for me. You're only taking from me. You are putting a YouTube blogger in jail. You are torturing my daughter. This is wrong. To keep saying that from inside the country. And the fact is that the Taliban are going through a very bad period of time as people in charge, right? They are facing a lot of angry citizens, as they should be. The people who are owed their pensions, right? Or they're firing all these people from the Ministry of Defense. I mean, there are a lot of people who are angry and should be angry, and all the people involved in the poppy trade, they're angry. So that's the kind of pressure I think right now that's really important to keep on. The people outside, I think, should be advocating, talking, doing everything you're doing, and also trying to find common ground. International community is not going to hold conversations with 65 organizations. They just aren't. There needs to be some kind of common platform and common agenda. And I think it has to move away from this strong desire that I see among some folks, my friends, where this one doesn't want to join that one's organization because they lose status. We're really beyond that. The people inside Afghanistan deserve the humility of everybody outside to say, we're going to join together and I don't care who's in charge.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. And what's your vision for Afghanistan in the next 10 to 15 years?
My vision in the sense of what I think will happen or what I want to have happen.
Both, both.
Let's leave what I think will happen aside.
Mhm.
What I want to have happen is a strong, incredibly vibrant and growing voice that gets together and forms a political um, movement that, with international support, becomes the movement that sits across the table from the Taliban and persuades them to give up this total control. And they push, and you push, to have rights and justice and stability and a better future with some jobs, maybe something for people to eat in the future. I mean, Afghanistan has that human potential. It soars, it's amazing, and it is being kept captive. So I want those cages opened, and I want all of those amazing people to be in charge. I would like you to go back and be in charge. I want you to be safe and go back and be in charge of something. And all of these really passionately patriotic people who are not diaspora, they are exiles. You are exiles. You want to go back and you want to be part of your country's future, and that's what I want to.
Yes, absolutely. And maybe at the end, we could get one message if you could have. I mean, you already mentioned briefly throughout your interview, directly to Afghan youth, those who are inside Afghanistan who will watch this interview, and those who are around the world and feeling voiceless. What message do you have for them?
I mean, my message, first of all, is of great compassion. I am so sorry that this is what you're going through right now. You don't deserve it. Nobody does. And my message is also that you're going to find the strength to get up every day and do one thing that pushes back.
Mhm.
And that is the only way that tyrants are pushed out of their position, is if everybody unites and pushes back.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ms. Annie Pforzheimer. I mean, I can assure you that the Afghan youth are struggling, they are trying, and they are unifying. We identify all of those individuals who care about the status more than actual work, and I mean, they're welcome to join us at any moment in the future. But it's an open, we have open arms to everybody. But not to those who are enjoying the comforts of the West, and they're living in the Western countries, but they are sympathizers of the Taliban. They believe they have similar viewpoints against women's restrictions, and they have similar views against denying Afghans their right to elect their leaders or to make their laws, or they have sympathies to regional countries, and they have had those sympathies and connections when they were working in government institutions or different places as activists, and they were receiving funding from different embassies, and so they were still receiving instructions of how to prevent Afghans from unifying, and we understand that. And so there is a huge challenge. I mean, it's not just Afghanistan. We are faced with Afghanistan that is led by the Taliban, who are terrorists, and who are the terrorists who are being supported and backed and financed by Russia, China, Iran, and others. And so it's not just Afghans that we are faced with. If that was the case, we would have never been in this situation ever. And so hopefully we will be able to tackle the situation that is in front of us with the support of the international community, because this is not something that can be done by Afghans alone, because the other side is not on its own. It's obvious that they are being supported by enemies of the world, and so we need those who wish to protect the world to help and support Afghans to address this threat together. And I also share and empathize with your view of having a situation where both sides could sit across the table. I mean, if United States and the Communists of China could remove their differences, or USSR
Yeah.
and US could resolve their differences and could live peacefully together. I mean, that could have been also, I would have also adhered to that hopefulness that you have of both sides working together, because I mean, practically it's not the case. It cannot happen because those who are designed to prevent the human freedom of women's freedom and denying the rights of the people, and that's all they're designed to do. The only thing that sitting across the table with them will do is for us to compromise on our values and compromise on our existence and our freedom, and that's not something that we are supposed to do as human beings. We need to fight for our freedom and values to the maximum extent possible, and in any for as long
Uh,
as it takes. So thank you very much. I mean, that's something for Afghans to address. Thank you so much. Glad to have you on the show. Appreciate and thank you for all the support and assistance and advocacy work that you're doing. Hopefully, we'll have you in future segments and shows. We'll see what happens with this background. If something happens or not, of course, we'll bring you back and we'll discuss about it.
okay.
So thank you very much. God
Thank you.
bless you. And to all of our viewers in Afghanistan and around the world, this was our episode of the Real Talks with Amini with Miss Annie Pforzheimer, a distinguished 30-year career U.S. diplomat who has served in hotspots around the world, and particularly in senior roles related to Afghanistan, not just in Kabul, but also covered Afghanistan and Washington. And she's also a strong voice for Afghanistan right now in the United States and one of the trusted allies of Afghanistan. Thank you very much. Until the next episode, God bless you. God bless Afghanistan. God bless United States, and God bless our world. Thank you.
Thank you.